So, hey everyone, I have never done an interview before, and what a better way to kick it off with a good friend of mine and someone that is animated on the latest God of War for Sony. So, this is Cody. Hi, Cody. I have
How's it going?
known him for a number of years, and he has worked for me in my small animation studio. So, first of all, is it better for working for Sony or for me? You don't have to answer that.
First question's the curveball
Yeah,
there.
just threw a question straight in there. No, jokes aside, it must be really different jumping from small studios like mine to mammoth companies like Sony and working on God of War. So I've got a few questions for you. Like I say, I've never done an interview on our channel, so hopefully the viewers will really enjoy it. So really basic questions. So first of all, tell our viewers about yourself. Just give a bit of background on you and how you got where you are.
Yeah. So I live in the States, on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, small little town called Hamburg that most people haven't heard of, but we're like 2 hours from Philadelphia, 2 hours from Manhattan. So we're in the central of nowhere, but we're close to things. I started off going to school to be an engineer. We had this really cool, in the States, we have like high school and, before we go to college, but I had an opportunity to work on engineering, like college courses while still in high school, and that was really cool. I was really good with math and science, and there was a project at one point where we had to model all, like when I say model everything, I mean all the little screws and gears and everything for a toy train. They gave us this, diagrams and modeling sheets, or like model this, and it was an Autodesk program called Inventor, which is like their engineering software. And
Sorry that all CAD sort of side of stuff.
right. And if we finished early, we had like a month to do it. If we finished early, they're like, oh, you can animate it, you can do this and that, whatever. I finished it in about a week. And I had 3 weeks to just mess around and animate it and make it go around a track and have like smoke come out of it. And I just remember, even though the engineering stuff was super easy for me, I had so much more fun in like those 3 weeks just making the animations happen. I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is what I really want to
So you
do.
knew what you wanted to do, and it's like that when it hits you when you get your passion. So have you done it? Did you actually go to like here in the UK? I went to art college and studied like graphic design. Did you do animation? Did you do like further studies and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I went to Full Sail University. It's in Winter Park, Florida, but I did their online course. I was actually, at the time, my oldest son was born about 2 or 3 days after my high school graduation, so online college was the thing to do while working full time. And I did their computer animation bachelor's program, and it was really it taught you a little bit of everything. I remember the first class there was an art class, and mind you, I was coming from engineering, and I doodled a lot as a kid, but I think I had to retake that first art class like 2 or 3 times. So art was not a natural, like, just I could do it thing. It was always difficult, but in a way that kind of worked with my personality, because I'm very stubborn, and when life told me, "Oh, you're not very good at art," I was like, "I'll show
Sure you.
you."
Good attitude to
um,
have.
Yeah, and that's kind of been my attitude throughout my entire career at this point. Is it's always been difficult and a struggle, but it's something I really enjoy and really want to do. So I've always just kind of pushed. But anyways, in Full Sail, we learned a lot. Mostly, you learned about the software. So we did some ZBrush, so learned some sculpting. We learned, obviously Maya. We did a couple of animation courses. We learned, using Nuke and compositing. Really, just the whole gamut of animation. It wasn't just character stuff, and you kind of got to pick what you liked from there.
I think that's
And
best because like I work as a generalist, so like not just character stuff, but modeling. And because I have my own client base, I have to be able to take a project from start to finish. So, I always tell like my viewers and stuff and people in our groups and stuff, it is better to have a wide skill set because it does make you more employable. But if you do want to specialize just in character animation, you can do it, but just have other skills as well. I think it's just makes you that more employable.
yeah, and I think a lot of that depends on your lifestyle too. Like for me, having a family at such a young age, my main like I had a passion and a drive, but my main priority was to be employable as soon as possible. And if that's your goal, being a generalist is absolutely all, because that I got started in, first a smaller company and then a larger company, but they didn't have an art department. They had me, like I was the animation department, and so they needed you to model, they needed you to rig, they needed you to be able to animate and then export and then work with the programmers to put stuff in game engines and stuff. So really, you needed to be able to do everything, and I think that's a great way to start. But I think what really helped my career progress is once I got in there, I really did start specializing and focusing and trying to kind of just, you go with the flow a little bit, but just kind of steer yourself towards where you want to go, because it is much towards the middle of your career, end of your career. It's much more marketable to be specialized, I think. Um,
Yeah, it's so true. Even though I was a generalist, I knew I wanted to do more character animation. So I did, like, even though I'd done all my college course, years later I went back to college and went to I Animate, places like that, which is just absolutely awesome to get like specialists. And I also did like a creature animation course with a sort of high end animator here in London and things like that. But that's brilliant. So that's a really good history, and it's now led you up to getting good jobs, working for nice companies like mine. And now you've suddenly jumped up and you managed to get a job, which is probably most people's dream job, working for Sony on an awesome game such as God of War. So I reckon my viewers will want to know, how did you get that job? How did you land that dream job with Sony working on such a good game?
yeah. Well, I think the time it took between college and getting that job is super important. A lot of big things happened. One was, even though that was an online course, I actually drove down to Florida. I drove down the coast to go to my graduation there, and I remember before I went down there, I was feeling like, so, like, I mean, everybody when they first started animating, I was like, I'm really good. I did great. And looking back, awful. But I remember, I was kind of sequestered and in a bubble in the online version. It wasn't, online was still kind of new back then. This was back in 2011. So like it was there and it functioned and it worked, but it wasn't really commonplace, so people didn't utilize it as much for social stuff. But I remember going down to that graduation and just meeting some of the other people there and going, oh my gosh, like some of them could really animate. And I was like, I am so far off. Like I was thinking, I'll get a job like tomorrow after I grad, but that wasn't the case. So I started studying, doing stuff on my own, going to Animators Island. I think that's still open, and just working through the exercises. And through all this, I eventually found, same as you, ianimate.net. And I was like, it was really cool because they were set up. It wasn't another school. It wasn't, you needed a huge loan for tuition. It was, you could pay for a workshop, and, you could take that knowledge and work, if you couldn't afford to do the next one, and work on that for a while. Yeah, and you got to work with, as you know, people who were in the industry. Like they were leads and supervisors at DreamWorks or at Pixar, and they would come home and then teach and show you how to do stuff. So it was really like, you were getting the best education you could there because it was real, it was working, and it was, it wasn't just theory. It was like, hey, I just told an animator today, this is what you need to make it great on this show. So I went through that, and I pretty much took any job I could take. I started off small. I was part-time at this, just doing graphic design. So I was like updating, it was a little mom and pop shop, updating product images on their website, taking photography and editing, that stuff. Once in a while, they'd have me do a little animation on their website. Did that for a while. I self-taught myself the Adobe Suite package, and use that to get a job at a corporate training company where they developed videos, games, applications for other corporate companies, like teaching them things and whatnot. And through that, I did a lot of 2D animation, which was fun. And they had some clients that were interested in 3D, and I was like, oh, I put my hand up right away. And it was me and another programmer. We pitched some pretty cool things, some AR and VR things and some 3D animation to some of these high level clients, and they liked it so much that they signed like contracts with us. And eventually I was there for about 6 years. Him and I had developed like an entire 3D animation department. So that's where I learned, I cut my generalist teeth and learned how to do a lot of other skills. And it should be known too that like during this time, nights, weekends, anytime I could, I was working on like personal stuff too. Like I'd animate something that I thought was cool, add to my reel and like get feedback from people. Every year, I heard about it from a podcast. I'd gone out to CTN, which is a Creative Talent Network Expo. It's out in Burbank, California, every November. And there, oh my God, I mean, you're flooded with artists and animators from around the world, and it was inspiring. And you could get feedback and meet people at the bar and have drinks with them. But anyways, through all the course of that, and I just kind of kept trucking along, and I would say it was from the time I graduated until Sony was about 7 or 8 years
Wow.
of just
Yeah, you've got to put in that work, and like doing personal work as well. Not only helps you do stuff that you know you enjoy, it keeps the passion alive as well. If you work on a client project and it's not that interesting, not all jobs are interesting. Personal work really keeps that fire alive. So all this
100%.
then, all this practice led up to being Sony. Did they find you, or you apply for a job with them? How just for our viewers, how did you get your feet in the door? Did they contact you?
I reached out to them. They had a post for a cinematics animator on LinkedIn, and
Yeah, LinkedIn is really good.
yeah, and I was lucky enough. So I mean, there's two sides to getting hired at a big place like that. It's one, you got to put in the work, and you have to show them that you can stand out and do the work that needs to be done. But there is also, and I always try to remind myself this, it helps kind of keep the ego in check of, there is an element of luck for a lot of things. Like in my case, I was very lucky that they were on a hiring boom. This was right on, a little bit after COVID, where video games and everything were just blowing up. So they were like, they were like, hire. They ended up hiring, I mean, a couple hundred people within within the span of a few months. I just remember everyone was like, yeah, PlayStation. So I was just in a wave of people who were hired, and
is that because they needed to ramp up the team to work on God of War, because it's such a big, complex game?
God of War, as well as a few other projects, they're always, I mean, they're large enough that they're constantly working on multiple projects, big game titles and stuff.
Okay. And one of the questions I have personally is, do they, you already go in, you've already got your skill set, but do they give you any like specific training or an induction, or do they just throw you in at the deep end? How does it work with someone like that?
When I came in on God of War, they had a training shot that you'd work on, a training scene, I should say. And a lot of that is because they use a mix of like industry tools, but they also use a mix of either proprietary software specific to them, or just proprietary tools and plugins for Maya, for Motion Builder, whatever it is that you're using there. So there was definitely a training period, I would say, for about a month of kind of going through the motions. Now you treated that it was a scene from the game, so it's like there's this one scene that when it pops up in the game, like every animator is like, wait, I remembered. Oh, that's right, that was the training shot. Okay, because like we all worked on the same one.
Is it training / like they're sort of testing you as well, or is it just purely?
No, so that was just purely training at that point. When I interviewed for it, they did send me a test, and I remember it was nothing at all. It was like the test was these like sci-fi soldiers with guns or something, and they really wanted to see if you could constrain things properly, work with animation layers, and they would say, hey, like change this part of the performance and smooth out this, or like they just kind of gave you this test shot before you even got hired. So I got that, and I was like, my mind was spinning about what I could be working on. And then after they had liked my test, then they told me God of War. I was like,
oh right. So when you apply for the job, you don't actually know what project you're going to be working on.
In this case, no, because I didn't sign the NDA until after.
When you found out it was the new God of War, I bet your mind was just blown, right?
Oh, I flipped. That was for being like my first job in the industry. I couldn't have worked on a better one. Like
that's just insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, imagine that. I'm working on God of War. Oh my god.
Yeah, right.
So do you get, when you work there, do you get to like work on a whole like range of animation, or does like Sony do they niche you down? Do they make you work like on sort of is it true that everyone's segmented? Like some animators are only put on body mechanics and others on facial? Because I did notice from the shots that you completed there was a lot of facial work in there. Do they pick who they want, or do you get to have a go at everything?
It really depends on the show. In God of War, I was strictly on the face solving team, and a lot of that is I came in towards, I would say, the middle of that project. So it was a learning curve for the people who worked on body on that particular show. It was very tech heavy, and once they had people that had that down, they were kind of like, these are our body, like they're going to take care of this. So in that particular instance, it was pretty sequestered. If you were on face, you were on face. If you were on body, you were on body.
Does that get
Um,
frustrating? Because I know, like for me, I like to do a range of stuff. If I was like stuck on faces or an arm or something for months on end, I'd probably get a bit, oh, let me try something else. I want to do a fight scene or something, yeah.
yeah, I think if that sectioning had continued on to other projects, it'd be a little frustrating. But I remember for that one, it was just, I mean, one, it was my first game project ever, and so I was just so excited to be there.
Oh, so you haven't actually
And
worked on any other games, video games before? It's all been like TV work, is it?
yeah, for the most part, I did work on. There was one small like indie developed game that unfortunately never made it past its second round of funding. So I worked on that game before, but like the first real deal AAA,
Well, that's
like yeah, this
interesting that
was
because normally they take people they have to have like got three AAA games under their belts. But I suppose because you're not doing the game animation, you're more of a cinematic animator. It doesn't matter if you come from a film and TV background, I suppose, right?
yeah. And here's the thing about that experience is that it's important, but it's not as important as your reel. So if you have a reel that shows that you can do, what they need to be done, or at least shows the potential, you have a much better chance than, because there are people that have a lot of experience under their belt that maybe their reel doesn't reflect that. Either their skills aren't necessarily up to par, or they just haven't showcased them in a nice way that caught someone's attention. So I mean, the reel is king, as you know, when it comes to getting a job anywhere. Like if you can knock them out of the park, if you can awe them with your reel, then they're not going to care if you've worked on no games or some games or 100 games.
Okay, cool. So my next question: are they all Maya based? I always say like Maya's industry standard. I know, but like Blender and everything's so popular and things at the moment. But in Sony, like, does everybody work on the same software? Do they have their own proprietary software, or does everybody work, in Maya?
Yeah, so it was definitely it's a Maya based studio. They also utilize Motion Builder a lot for mostly for like motion capture, cutting up and exports
Yeah, I've only used
for
Motion Builder
layout.
years ago. It's a pretty good software. I didn't know it was still used actually. That's good to know.
Yeah, I guess it's really good for taking the raw mocap data and like setting it up for layout, for the camera layout crew. So, but I'm not super familiar with it. I've touched it once or twice, but in my time at Sony, it was strictly Maya.
So do they have any like
They
specialist tools then? Do they have any like
Oh
Pixar and
yeah,
everything? They write their own hair systems, write their own particle systems and stuff like that. But does Sony have their own specific tools that like only people on the inside can use, and they have to like teach you to use them?
absolutely. Yeah, they had a lot of like custom, Python scripts and Mel scripts and tools that were integrated um, into Maya. Most of them or just for internal things, for like backing up files, for sending files, for prepping files to go to like to export to tech art for them to then export in the game engine. And it was a lot of automation, which was nice. It was so anybody who maybe wasn't tech savvy at all, like there's a lot of people who like they were animators and that's it. They didn't know anything about the tech side of it. If something broke, like if Maya needed an update, they're like, what do I do? So they set it up very nicely so that you could just click a button. And I mean, for the most part, there were some nuances there, but you basically just click a button and whoosh, it goes
Yeah,
to
I
tech
suppose when
art.
they've
And
got like dozens or hundreds of animators all work on the
yeah,
same project, they have to make it so like such an easy process for them, don't they? So
yeah.
this is quite an important question. Did, did you work remotely, right? You didn't actually have to go into their offices every day, or was it mixed, hybrid? And tell us about that.
Yeah, this was fully remote again. Comes down to luck. This was another thing that was kind of stacked against me. Was when I would apply to jobs. A lot of them were in California, which is way, it's a 6 or 7 hour flight from where I'm at across the country, and it was hard pre-COVID to get someone to even interview you. A lot of the times they wanted you to be a resident of California for at least a year or two, so you had to move out there with no job, and that was like your best chance to get one, which obviously was very tough for me with the family. So I was very thankful when, I mean, as bad as COVID was for a lot of people, it definitely opened up some opportunities on my end, which was, allowing me to work fully remote. They shipped me out a computer, monitor, mouse, keyboard, all this stuff. They had like a stipend that they would send us. It was a couple $1,000, so like you could buy a desk and buy a chair, buy anything you needed to like set up your space to make it ergonomic. So luckily I had been working from home or remotely for a while now at my last job for a few years. So I kind of had everything all set up. So it was really just adding another desk and then adding the computer that they had, and doing everything through, they used like a VPN. So everything was secure. And it was, I think there were some hiccups in the beginning, but it really turned out to be kind of a smooth process. It was, we didn't do, well, we used Slack, which was nice. So you always had contact with your leads, your soups, your other animators. And then we also, we would have like, not dailies. That was the one thing that was different. Like where I kind of wish we did, where everybody sat in together. But
Yeah,
we used,
that's it's really nice to have dailies. We're all doing the same thing, but with the technology advancements now, you can just all get into Zoom and stuff. But there is that sort of office culture you miss out on. But being able to work remotely, that's just amazing. Was everyone else remote, or was it a mix sort of plan? Some remote, some on site.
everyone started remote because the studio was shut down when I got hired because of COVID. They still hadn't released everyone to come back into work. Now there are, for the most part, once that opened back up, like a lot of the engineers would be in the studio all the time because they were working on the tech stuff, and like they needed to be on site. The rest of the people, some of them lived near the studio and they'd come in once in a while. Some of them lived, in Northern California, and so they would just visit, a couple times a year. They'd go there for like a couple of days or a week and just kind of see everybody. Some people would fly out just to say hi, but for the most part, there were some like myself who I had never stepped foot in the studio, other than they did a little virtual tour once where they wheeled a laptop and webcam around to show us all the stuff.
God, times have really changed, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't even met some of my clients, not even some of the animators I use around the globe, and it's just you just don't need to anymore. But you do miss out on some things. But I really enjoy working remote, and obviously using animators like you, who are the other side of the world to me. It just doesn't matter anymore. You know.
Well, there was a manager there who was all about it, and there's me and a few other animators who we very much missed that like togetherness, that culture. So we had like virtual happy hours once a week, like every Friday night. We'd all get together, have drinks, and talk about stuff. And we would even arrange, like, just kind of based off region in the U.S. Like we would have like a Northeast Coast like gathering. Like we'd get together in Manhattan, or we'd get together in New Jersey or something, and we'd go spend a day having dinner and hanging out in person. And there was definitely an emphasis on that. Like you had to be proactive. And that's something like I love the social aspect. I love talking to people. I love hanging out. So I was like very, very proactive with that, and just saying like, so let's make this work. I said, I don't like not talking to people.
Okay, so this is the question that I'm sure all my viewers want to know. Can you tell our viewers how they would go about getting a job at Sony or any of the big game companies, and what advice would you give them?
Well, first you have to write a big check and write to Sony. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Bribes might work, but that has not been my experience.
Because I think it's achievable for for anyone. It's not like, oh, I could never work for a big company like that, really. So if you've got any advice or how you actually got the job, let us know.
Yeah, I think that's something. It's definitely different for everybody, and talking with people that that when I was at Sony Media, like there were some that were new like me. There were some that had been, animating for ages on so many like cool projects and interesting things. And I think whoever you are, there's some people that they're rock stars. They come out right out of the gates with talent, and basically they just need to show that. So that would be my advice to them. And then there's other people, more like me who, they're not, they're not this bubbling pot of raw talent. But it's something they really want to do. Like for me personally, I love animation. I can never quite understand or figure out why. It's a thing for me. Like everything else in my life has been kind of, I enjoy it for like a month or two, like really, and then I never touch it again. And animation, just for years and years, it's stuck with me. So I think if you're that kind of like, I think you need to have that. If you don't have the raw talent, you need to have just that inexplicable passion, desire. And if you've got that, then I would say just don't give up. Just keep, trying to better yourself, and, keep looking for feedback and finding ways that you can improve yourself for your specific situation. Some people, if you live in California and you got a lot of money, you can go to CalArts, and you can, work with some phenomenal artists there, and get nice, cool internships and stuff like that. If you're in another country, maybe you don't have, find books online, find resources, find, your website here and your YouTube channel is great for people who, might not have access to things that are either more expensive or just they're in a different time zone or whatever. Really, whatever you can, whatever combination you can find to better yourself, and then look at your work with an honest eye. Don't look at your work and be like, oh, this is amazing. You got to look at it and be like, even if you feel really good about it, try and figure out like, okay, well, how can I make this better?
Yeah, and I always say to people as well, people learning, it's like accept criticism, get people to critique it, because there's going to be stuff that you think is really cool, and somebody just picks out something, you're like, oh, and you have to be able to take that and go, okay, yeah, if people are seeing it, people are saying, oh, he looks a bit off balance there or something, you have to say, right, I'll fix that. And you only learning it better from practicing and redoing it, and then somebody else critiquing your work. It's like when I was at college, like the way you learn design was you get critiqued, you learn from it, you get better and move on. So yeah, that's good advice. It's, and for someone then who thinks they've got a half decent reel, what do? They just contact Sony, or just look out for a post on LinkedIn like you did?
It's definitely look for job postings. I know my wife briefly was had a career in recruiting. She's moved on. She works on a school system now. So I have a little bit of like an inside track of like what it's like to be a recruiter. And I know if they're not actively hiring, your contact to them could go unnoticed. They might just be too busy and not be able to respond to it, and that can be a little demoralizing if you're sending it to someone who's not hiring and you don't get any feedback, or they dismiss you. It might not be very helpful for you. So I would definitely say look for one that is that's hiring, and not only that, but make sure when they're hiring, read the description, read exactly what they're looking for, and make sure that you fit that skill set. And this is something, even if I'm looking around at new gigs and new opportunities, that I will make sure to do, because it's very important. Like if you apply to something and it's very obvious from your reel or your experience that you don't have what they're looking for, it looks bad on you. Like even if like you come back years later,
like you haven't done the research. Yeah.
Right. They're going to remember like, oh, well, this person, they either didn't read, the posting, or they didn't understand it. And that's really important, because you got to remember on the other side, sometimes you'll get form letters and whatnot, but on the other side of these applications are, they're people, and they see things, they remember things, they think about things. So you want to always remember that.
Do they give you feedback? Sorry, I was just thinking of another point there where you say it. Do they give you feedback on? Because I know that they've got so many reels to go through. If you literally don't hear anything, you obviously haven't been successful. They don't have time. But do some of them, does Sony, do they give any feedback on your reel, even if you're unsuccessful or successful, or just if you're successful?
I can't speak to being unsuccessful, because I only applied to, now granted, I applied to about a little over 200 jobs in the the 6 or 7 years between Sony and college and all that. So I had a lot of rejections. And I will say this, that I can count on one hand the number of times that I have been given feedback with a rejection. So it's not common. And so I very much appreciate when it happens. And you definitely have to hold on to that. If someone gives you feedback when you get rejected, know that that is a special thing. And really, I would really focus on that, because it's a very busy industry. It's very competitive, and recruiters, they're people just like you and I, and they are incredibly busy, and they've got to go through sometimes hundreds, even thousands of applicants, and it's
I
not
always try,
possible for them to do
I
it.
mean, I'm only a small studio, but I do get real sent to me, and I really do try and reply, even if it's just something to say, this isn't
Yeah.
right, this is right, just to help, because I know what it's like on the other side. But, I don't have 1,000 employees and all this sort of, massive systems to run. So, another question, and one final question really is, the giants like Sony, would they take on junior animators? Would they give people a chance, or is it literally, you have to have had the experience, you have to a good quality animation? Because I'm sure there's so many junior animators that watch my tutorials, they join Animator Artist Life, but they're at the beginning of their career. Will Sony give people like junior artists a chance?
I think it really depends on the project, the timing. There's a few other things, but I want to get into the project and timing first. The thing about larger studios, or really any studio, when they hire, there's usually different phases. So they will do, generally on the beginning of a project, they'll only have a couple people jump on. There might be 3, 4, 5 people, and they're looking for very experienced heavy lifters, people who have done it before, because the beginning of a project is very difficult. That's usually you're working with a new director or a new client. You're typically working with a new style. Everything is new technology, whatever. At the beginning of a project is very difficult for people who have experience. So that they want someone who they know they can animate. They've been proven to animate. They can do it really well, because that is going to be secondary to getting the show on the road and getting the infrastructure in place, so that when new people come in, it's a seamless transition. So that's important. Towards the middle, it's usually, okay, we're beefing it up. So we still want, some more experienced people. We want, people who they might need some help, but they can really, nail this down and hit the ground running. And then sometimes some projects towards the end, they're like, okay, this deadline's approaching fast. We have X amount of work to do. We have Y amount of time. We just boom, 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 boom. And that more or less is where I was hired in there. So while technically I had been animating for, many years, it was my first time in the gaming industry. So I was animating for a while, but I was coming from a different industry. So my experience was kind of, I was brought in at a mid-level technically. But I think, again, a lot of that came from, one, I at that point had a reel at display that I could at least, I could animate well. And again, I was lucky enough that they needed people. So that is the time when companies would be willing to take more of a chance, when, we just need someone who can, boom, 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 pump out work.
So there's a lot of variables involved, really. It depends. It's not like, we don't mind giving junior animators a chance. I mean, I always think junior animators are better off going to smaller companies, not because, they offer more jobs, is because you get more experience. You get to learn off other artists that are closer to you, a studio with maybe 10, 20 animators on, instead of someone like Sony at first, I think. But, it's just good to get your input and know, if they do give people a chance. But I mean, I always say, go for it, follow your dream. You never know. It's better to try, I think,
Oh yeah, definitely go for it, and don't quit too. That's another thing. Like, you kind of have to go into it with the mindset. Again, some people it happens faster for, but it's always good to expect. In my life, I try to plan for the worst, so that way when better things happen, it's good. And so my attitude towards animation with anybody starting out is always, plan that it could take years. Do you want to invest 5 to 10 years of nights and weekends and rejections, because it happens, and that's a common story for a lot of people. It's a very competitive industry, especially now. Everybody loves animation, and it's a lot more accessible to learn it. So there's thousands of people out there, that want to do it. But I will say, just try and get involved. And I don't. One thing that's been helpful for me, and it took a while until I learned the difference between building, relationships with people versus building connections. I remember the first time going to an expo, I went there with my business cards, and I was collecting business cards and handing them out. And I was like, oh, I'm making all these connections. And I don't think there's anybody from that first year that I still contact with, because it was very face value. It wasn't like an actual relationship. It was just, oh yeah, I thought it was this like
Rapport and
exchange.
relationship is really important, whether it's with a client or with an employee or another studio. 100%. That's great advice.
Right. And each time I went back there, like I started to find people, and like they weren't somebody that was hiring, they weren't somebody that was interviewing. Sometimes it wasn't even someone that had like given me a critique of my reel. It was just someone like, oh, I had a good time. We hung out at the bar. We had a drink. We were laughing at a little show that was there, and like I built friendships with these people. And where that came into play huge, like if you're in a studio, let's say you're in a big studio like Sony, because this does happen. This year alone there was across the industry a few thousand layoffs. Through all the different larger studios. And when you're in a situation like that, it's super important. Like even once you get the job, your job's not done. Like you're still with people. You still, you want to be friendly, and but these friendships that you build with, these people in the trenches, I like to call it, whether it's in school, at work, that's going to help you continue your career later on down the road. If a layoff happens, they're like, oh, I found a job over here. I know this guy. Quick, come over here. And it's a small industry. So that's my other advice, is be nice to everybody. And yeah, just don't be afraid to be who you are. Like you definitely don't want to be like a difficult person to work with, like always arguing, but you also, you want to stand out and think on your own 2 feet. And some of that takes time. You listen a lot more before you start talking, but eventually, you kind of develop your own style and become who you are. And
yeah, it's like making yourself memorable to the producer. Say, oh, I remember them, that I got on with them, made them feel easy. I want to work with them again. It's just making an impression. It's not just about being an animator. It's about who you are and the person as well. So that's really good advice. Yeah, good one. Okay, so I think that's it. And I'd like to say, what's next for you? Are you allowed to tell? Are you allowed to sort of spill the beans on got anything planned, or you got a new job, new project?
Yeah, well, I have one. It's unreleased. All I can say is it's from PlayStation. It's coming out in fall. I'm really excited for it. I got to do a lot of body animation. I did some face, but a lot of body. It was very stylized. I even got to do a lot of hand key animation. I'm really excited for it. Unfortunately, I can't say anything about it, but it is coming out this fall, and once it releases, I'll be able to announce that. But currently I'm working for Superseed Studios on the Lord of the Rings Return to Moria.
Wow, from God of War to Lord of the Rings. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Well done.
So anybody watching this who is a Lord of the Rings fan, I mean, you can see at least some of the memorabilia that I have here. I've got banners and posters and stuff. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings geek, so this project has been a lot of fun.
Well, that was amazing. Thanks, Cody. Honestly, I really appreciate you coming. Viewers, this is the first interview that I've done on this. If you'd like to see more, if you'd like to get Cody back when he works on his next big games, which you'd love to hear more about Lord of the Rings, let us know in the comments. Now, I'm going to leave all of Cody's showreel and details and stuff like that. I'm going to leave it all in the description if anybody wants to check out more of his work, if any companies want to get in contact with him as well. And again, I just want to thank you so much for spending the time. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Give us your feedback, and yeah, thanks, Cody. That was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for having me, dude. I appreciate the time. Yep. Cheers. Da-da-da-da-da-da.